This is the king's garden, and it just seemed like a nice one for the times. There was a king, and he loved his family, and he loved his people, and he was much loved in return. And he had a name for making fair and just judgments, and he worked hard to keep things that way. But a day of being majestically magisterial is really quite tiring. And at the end of the day, he loved nothing more than to go into his garden to be restored. Now, even as he walked towards it, and as soon as he breathed in the scent of the flowering rambler that spread itself over the hedge and nearly obscured the entrance, he already began to feel better. Once he was through that hedge, then the paths, well, they curved and they twisted, which meant that he could take a different route through the garden each day. Now, he'd known that garden all his life, but he was still celebrating with a sort of almost a sense of joyful discovery when suddenly turned a corner and came to, for example, the glade where the thrush had his anvil stone, and in between tapping away at snail shells, he would sing his heart out from an old holly tree that was in the glade. Or there was the place where the tree trunks opened out a little bit, and there was a small meadow. And in summer, the gem-like colours of the flowers and their scents there, that was what I was going to look for there, competed with the shrilling of the grasshoppers for your attention. And then a little further on, there was the place where on the far bank of a small lake, there were some beautiful banks of vivid flowers, and they would brushstroke their colours in a sort of path across the water towards you. And there were so many more sights, and it was always different every time of the year, and smells and sounds. And sometimes he'd also meet the old gardener who'd already seemed old when the king was a boy. Now, he liked talking with the old gardener because he was the only man on the whole royal estate who chose to call him Your Majesty when it pleased him, and not otherwise. He was a good man to talk to. So, when the royal family of the neighbouring kingdom came for an official visit, our king was very keen to show his garden off. And when the royal children were busy playing hide and seek up in the attics, and when the two queens were busy gossiping about the art of managing your king without tears, the two kings went for a walk in the grounds. I'd like to show you my own garden, he said, and in they went. Now, from the moment when they passed through that scented archway until the moment they got out again, although he sneaked a little look now and again at the face of his friend, he didn't want to actually say anything, didn't want to spoil the spell. But once they got out, he said, well, what do you think? My dear friend, said the king, visiting, it's very charming, isn't it? I mean, it's really very quaint. But I'm wondering, if I'm honest, does it do you justice as a king? I mean, you know as well as I do that these days being a king, a lot of it's about making a statement. Does this garden hidden away behind its hedge, does it say, here is a man who rules and provides order? Or does it have a different message? Now, if it was the garden of a little country squire, maybe 2 generations ago, I would be praising it to the skies. But, well, when you come to see it in about a month's time, come and have a look at my garden, and then you'll know what I'm talking about. Well, after that royal family had gone home and the king looked back at his own garden again, it did seem a little bit homely, perhaps, and perhaps a little bit tatty. And when they went to see the other garden on the return visit to the neighbouring kingdom, well, my goodness me, he could see what the king meant. Could he see it? You couldn't avoid seeing it. Because it was no hedge round it, it was the first thing you saw when you approached the palace. And it was impressive. There was a lot of geometry. Beautifully ordered areas of grass, totally well manicured, were bordered by ruler straight paths. There were a lot of carefully calculated intersecting angles. Straight down the middle of the garden, there was a broad walk with beautifully trimmed, identical trees at well-regulated intervals. This path divided to go around a perfectly proportioned oval pond in the middle. He was impressed. It did say, here is power, here is everlasting and ever shall be stability. I can see you're impressed, said the king who owned it. I tell you what, I'll get my chaps to make a copy of the plans, and then you can take them home and give it to your chaps, and then you can get them to build one too. And that's just what he did. As soon as he got home, he summoned the royal gardener, and the old man came in. It's about the garden, said the king. The gardener said nothing. He had a fair idea it would be. It's about the garden. I've been thinking. It's the same, really, as it was in my father's time, and I think in my grandfather's time too. Well, yes, sir, thank you, said the gardener. We do our best to keep it looking that way. I mean, plants come and trees go, but we do our best to keep the spirit of it. Yes, but that's the thing, said the king. It's dated, isn't it? I mean, these days, the royal garden is all about making a statement. This one doesn't do it anymore. Look, can you build this one for me? And he unrolled the plans and gave them to the gardener. Well, yes, sir, we can build this for you. Where would you like it? On top of the existing garden. You want me to rip out your grandfather's garden and put this instead? Yes, that's it. Well, if that's what your majesty wishes, then that is your majesty's pleasure, and that is what your majesty will have. And he bowed stiffly, something he never did, and walked out. The next day, the royal estate rang to the sound of axe on wood and mattock on root. Now, the hedge was still up, so the king couldn't see what was going on, and he wanted to go every 5 minutes and see how it was getting on. But the wisdom of his wife persuaded him not to do this, until they took the hedge away, and there it was in all its splendor, and the royal family could process along that central broad walk, and they could separate to circumnavigate the superbly well-proportioned oval pond, and they could walk to the far end, and then they could walk back again, and they could see it all. Beautiful. And it did impress people. When they came to the palace, they could see it. Now, it was about this time that the king found he was getting rather more vexatious cases to deal with. And he was saying as much to his wife. And she commented that, well, he didn't go for walks in the garden each day as he used to. I could get time, said the king, all these ridiculous cases people are bringing. Besides, I only have to look out of the window and there it is, all spread out before me, beautifully proportioned. But she persuaded him that some fresh air would do him good. So out he went, and he walked along the ruler straight path by the lollipop-shaped trees. And he stopped, he frowned, and he sniffed, and he listened. And then he marched straight across the manicured grass, past the beech hedge, which still stood at the back of the garden to screen the royal kitchen gardens, to where the old gardener used to have his hut. Yes, it was still there. And if you know that earthy, dry, organic smell of a gardener's hut, you'll know that no thousands of words of mine can describe it to people who don't. And there was the old man. He was potting on some plants. This garden, said the king, it's wrong. The old man turned round. I think your majesty will find it's exactly as those plans you gave me specified, he said. I don't doubt that, said the king. Don't doubt that, but I've just been walking there and it's the same as it was yesterday and the same as it was last month. And I can't hear birds singing and I'm not smelling things. Well, that, your majesty, said the gardener, is because you had me take out everything that would have been interesting, like that holly tree where the old thrush used to sing. Broke my heart, that did. His family's been there for generations. And all the other things you made me take out. Of course there's nothing there like that. There's never going to be anything. It's going to be the same today, tomorrow. That's what your plans wanted. It's what you wanted, and it's what you got. But it's not what I want now, said the king. I want you to take it away. Put the other one back. I'm sorry, sir. We can take it away with pleasure, but we can't put the other one back. Some of those trees that your grandfather planted, they're only just coming into maturity. That's how long it takes. And then seeing the king looking so crestfallen, he said, but we can make a start. When? Said the king. And the first time the gardener smiled. Tomorrow, he said. Now there was no hedge this time to disguise the sea of mud. But pretty soon you could see those curved paths beginning to take their shape again. And saplings which the old gardener had been surreptitiously bringing on at the back of the old kitchen garden nursery plot, they reappeared. But it was a few months before the gardener came and requested the king to come and see something. And there, between two areas of the sea of mud, there was a little stalk, little stem, with a couple of leaves on top. There, he said. You see that, sir? That's going to be an oak tree, that is. You can see from the leaves. Not an oak tree yet, and it won't be a proper oak tree until your children are older than you are now. But the thing is, I've been planting those saplings. They're coming on. That came there by itself. Some animal or creature brought it there. I didn't plant it, which means it's starting, sir. It's coming back. It's starting. And it was quite soon after that when the king realized that there weren't so many vexatious cases to deal with after all. And that is the king's garden.